Well, calm in the Middle East lasted just about a week as Hamas threatened Monday to withdraw from the tenuous ceasefire agreement with Israel. President Trump said if the remaining hostages are not released by Saturday, then...
Well, I would say this, and I'm going to let that be because that's Israel's decision, but as far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out.
And that's not all. Trump's plan to develop Gaza as a premier resort of some kind is having major repercussions in the Middle East.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who you just saw in that clip, applauded the plan, but much of the world was taken aback.
Trump dug in. He is now threatening to end American financial support for Jordan if it fails to accept up to 2 million Palestinians.
And that's Sophie's choice for the tiny nation that has been the most reliable Arab ally of the United States in the region. No aid means the end of the tiny Hashemite kingdom, but so does agreeing to accept up to 2 million Palestinians.
Jordan's King Abdullah is meeting with Trump today to try to correct the U.S. president's vision for Gaza and the 2 million Palestinian refugees. With us now to discuss is Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Welcome back to Rising.
Thank you.
So what are the chances that this deal, the tenuous peace deal, I think that's how we describe it, does actually collapse now? What is the timeline for releasing the hostages? And are we now in jeopardy of Israel and Hamas having another round of warfare between them?
Well, we are at jeopardy of all of those things, and very much as a result of Trump coming out with his vision of saying that essentially he's going to turn Gaza into some sort of a beach resort without the Palestinians. If you are sitting in Hamas's shoes or any Palestinian faction's shoes, the entire point of the ceasefire was to get back to a situation in which the Palestinians would have control to the extent that they can under occupation of their own territory. But if you're saying that the ceasefire eventually will lead to ethnic cleansing of Gaza, with all of these Palestinians being shoved into the Sinai or into Jordan, then suddenly the incentive structure for any Palestinian faction to go along with this, obviously, is going to be very questionable. From the Israeli standpoint, this is music to the ears. I think, to be frank, Netanyahu was quite surprised. They didn't expect to get this much. In fact, they hadn't even been pushing for this much from Trump, but they got it. And this gives them a perfect way out to make sure that they never have to go to phase 2 of the deal that Witkoff and Trump helped negotiate and secure, which from the outset had been a big suspicion that Netanyahu never wanted to actually make the deal go beyond phase 1. And now in the Knesset, he's openly bragging that complete victory, total victory is in sight now, and that's what they're going to go for. Total victory means no compromise. It means that Israel manages to get everything that it wants. And in terms of Gaza, that means a Gaza Strip that is depopulated, that is ethnically cleansed from Palestinians. This is going to be profoundly destabilizing for the region, and it will completely counter what Trump has promised the American people, which is to help the United States get out of the Middle East. This is going to suck the U.S. back into it. Just today, reports came out that about 100 special forces of the United States have now been hired as contractors to man the checkpoints in Gaza. So we're getting sucked back in, and this is very much as a result of Trump adopting this truly destabilizing and shocking idea.
Trita, I wanted to pick up on that point you raised about the destabilizing effect in the broader region, because of course this isn't just confined to Gaza, or for that matter, not confined to Gaza, Jordan and Egypt even. There is obviously a danger, I think, of this proposal inflaming the quote-unquote Arab street to a large extent, and obviously perhaps boosting anti-American sentiment further. So how does this all play out? Because to be fair, the United States does have fairly significant leverage with Jordan and Egypt because of the amount of aid provided. But how does it play out in the broader region in terms of the instability that you're talking about?
Well, first of all, what you pointed out in the introduction is absolutely true. On the one hand, Jordan can likely not be able to make it without the aid that the U.S. provides. On the other hand, they can also absolutely not make it if they have to take 1 million to 2 million refugees. And it's not just about the numbers, it's also about the identity of Jordan itself. Already half of its population are Palestinian refugees. And this was just throw off the existing balance. And then again, as you mentioned, Jordan has been one of the more stable countries in the region for some time now. This would destabilize, potentially bring down the king and his government altogether. So that in and of itself will have profound destabilizing implications for the region. But beyond that, I mean, you have not a single country in the region coming out in support of this. The Turks have said it's unacceptable. The Saudis have come out with some of their strongest statements against this idea. And it's really interesting because it really seems to be killing whatever chance there was for Trump to get some sort of a Saudi-Israeli normalization deal. And what is fascinating here is to see how little the Israelis care that those chances are now being minimized to next to zero. Because between the option of total victory and ethnic cleansing in Gaza and getting rid of the Palestinians altogether, and normalization with Saudi Arabia, which would be followed likely by normalization with other Arab countries, it's clear that the Israelis, at least the Netanyahu government, prefers the former rather than the latter. So the idea that normalization was some sort of a big prize for the Israelis, which they themselves had said for some time, seems not to be the case, because they seem to be quite happy of foreclosing that opportunity, instead going for what Netanyahu has called total victory, completely depopulate Palestinian territories and annex it with the blessing of the United States.
I mean, it just seems to become very like, what is the good or desirable option? Israel doesn't want these people, frankly, on its borders. None of these other countries.
It's not Israel's choice.
These
people have been there for thousands of years. So whether it wants it or not, we have to recognize that certain things are not on the table.
Well, I mean, they don't have to do anything if they're willing to continue a war against the terrorist group controlling the region and accept any number of casualties. I mean, they're not going to be stopped from doing that. And if no other country is willing to take in the Palestinians, and I mean, what is? Are we thinking of the Palestinians as a monolith? Do they all wish to remain in an area that has now been totally destroyed? Do they not? What is their desire at this point?
Well, I think that is a very simple question, because the desire for the Palestinians for more than 70 years is to be able to go back to their country. Many of the people of the Palestinians in Gaza are refugees who were living in Palestine before the creation of Israel and before the 1947 Nakba. So they were pushed into Gaza. And their commitment to their land is solid. It is grounded in international law, reaffirmed by the ICJ decision last year, reaffirmed by the UN General Assembly resolution in September of last year. So there's never been a question about that. I actually think it's pretty good that Trump is willing to think outside of the box, because the box the United States has been thinking in is exactly what has led us to this situation. So I think that's very good. But he's thinking in the wrong side of the outside of the box. What we really need right now, and what he seemed to have suggested early on, was to actually have a creation of a Palestinian state, together with security guarantees for the Israelis, to make sure that both countries, both peoples, can have their right for sovereignty and national statehood satisfied with security. That option is still on the table. It needs political will from all sides to push it through. And Trump had the opportunity, particularly if he wanted to do a normalization between the Saudis and the Israelis, in which the Saudis increasingly were moving close to actually demanding a Palestinian state, not just the pathway to it being part of the deal. This could have been done. This still can be done. Instead, he's going down the path that will create another refugee crisis, another destabilizing event in the region that will then haunt the region and the United States for decades to come. And it will not be a solution. The idea that this actually is a solution that provides the Israelis with security has been disproven over and over again. If it was true, all the previous rounds of ethnic cleansing would actually have provided Israel with that security, and clearly it has not.
Trita, before we let you go, I want to ask a question more about the practicalities rather than the politics. I saw at the end of last year a UN report that around 69 or 70% of all the structures in Gaza have either been destroyed or damaged. And I'm reading other reports that just clearing unexploded ordnance from there could take years. So what is your best guess as to how that gets done? I mean, do we see, separate from Trump's plan, do we see other Arab nations come in to assist with that rebuilding, or how does it work?
Obviously, all of those things are going to be very challenging and very costly. Those things will have to be done either way, though. So even if you want to turn it into a beach resort, you still have to do the cleaning up of all of the different bombs that the Israelis have dropped in Israel, in Gaza, and all the building that it has destroyed. So that is inescapable. The question is, the United States, I assume, is not going to fund and pay the bill for that cleaning up. The United States is going to expect some of the... Yeah, exactly. But, you know, given the fact that Trump was going to move away from nation building and things like that, which I strongly endorse him for and support, this is nation building on crack. So this is a complete turnaround from and a betrayal of his base in many different ways. I don't think it has quite sunk in yet because people are still doubting whether he's really serious or if this is just a negotiation tactic. But if you want to get someone else to fund this, and there is obviously the option of going to some of the Gulf Arab states who have the means to be able to fund something, they're not going to fund it if it's going to be part of an ethnic cleansing campaign. You might have a chance of getting them to fund it as they have done before, if this is the beginning of actually getting some sort of a stability there. But they're not going to underwrite the ethnic cleansing campaign of the century for Trump. That's just simply not going to happen.
Trita Parsi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.